A single word. That's all it took to send tremors through the corridors of power in Washington, Brussels, and beyond. When President Donald Trump picked up the phone to call Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney with what he believed was a straightforward request between allies, he expected cooperation. What he got instead was a response so blunt, so unexpected, that it has forced everyone to reconsider what we thought we knew about North American alliances. We're talking about uranium, the fuel that powers nuclear reactors, military submarines, and potentially the entire artificial intelligence revolution. Trump needs it desperately. Canada has it in abundance. And right now, America's northern neighbor is playing hardball in ways that could redraw the map of global power for the next half-century. This isn't just a trade dispute. This is a fundamental shift in how two of the world's closest allies see each other. And the consequences? They're already unfolding. To understand what's happening, we need to start with what's been going on quietly inside the White House over the past month. The Trump administration has been working overtime on something ambitious, perhaps the most aggressive nuclear energy plan America has seen in decades. The goal is to construct 200 small modular reactors across the country. These aren't your grandfather's nuclear plants. They're compact, advanced facilities designed to provide the kind of constant, reliable power that artificial intelligence data centers demand around the clock. The financial commitment we're discussing here is staggering, roughly $400 billion. And the potential payoff is even bigger, up to $2 trillion in economic value as the United States positions itself to dominate the AI economy. But there's a fundamental problem standing in the way of this entire vision. The United States doesn't produce the uranium it needs anymore. Recent data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration reveals something startling. America imports 95% of its uranium. Domestic production has withered over the decades, leaving the country dependent on foreign suppliers for one of its most strategic resources. And when you look at who controls the world's uranium supply, Canada emerges as a critical player. The country accounts for approximately 13% of global production, and more importantly, it possesses some of the richest uranium deposits on the planet, located in Saskatchewan's Athabasca Basin. This brings us to the phone call. According to multiple officials who were briefed on the conversation and spoke with Reuters under anonymity, Trump reached out to Prime Minister Carney with what seemed like a reasonable proposal between partners. He wanted three things. First, guaranteed access to Canadian uranium at competitive prices. Second, expedited approvals for processing nuclear fuel. And third, assurance that Canada wouldn't prioritize sales to China or other nations that might compete with American interests. Trump reportedly framed this as a win-win situation, a matter of mutual security and shared economic benefit. He emphasized that strengthening American nuclear capacity would ultimately strengthen North American energy independence as a whole. There was a pause on the other end of the line. One source described it as distinctly uncomfortable. Then came Carney's answer. No, not let's explore this further, not we need to discuss terms. Just a flat rejection. The word landed like a diplomatic bombshell. To grasp why this matters so profoundly, you need to understand what makes Canadian uranium so valuable in the first place. Canada isn't simply another country that happens to have uranium deposits. It's a nuclear technology leader with sophisticated capabilities that extend far beyond mining. The nation developed CANDU reactor technology, one of the world's most advanced heavy water reactor systems. And when it comes to uranium quality, Canadian ore is in a league of its own. Here are the numbers that explain everything. Uranium from the Athabasca Basin averages about 20% uranium content. The global average for uranium ore sits somewhere between 0.1% and 0.3%. What this means in practical terms is that Canadian uranium is anywhere from 70 to 200 times more concentrated than what you'd find almost anywhere else on Earth. It's cheaper to extract, requires less refining, and generates less waste in the process. For nuclear fuel production, Canadian uranium represents the highest standard available. Now, contrast this with America's current uranium supply chain. The United States sources uranium from Kazakhstan, which provides roughly 25% of supply. Russia accounts for 14%. Australia contributes 11%. Canada 13%. Smaller amounts come from Namibia and Niger, according to World Nuclear Association figures. Here's where Trump's challenge becomes clear. Kazakhstan operates firmly within Russia's geopolitical orbit. Given everything that's happened with Ukraine and broader Russian relations, relying on Russian nuclear fuel has become politically impossible. Australia has production constraints. That leaves Canada as the only major, politically stable, allied supplier the United States can genuinely count on. And Trump needs that uranium for something that goes far beyond traditional energy policy. The explosion in artificial intelligence has created energy demands that most people don't fully appreciate. Companies like OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, and Amazon are engaged in a technological arms race, building data centers that require enormous amounts of electricity, not intermittent power from solar or wind, but constant baseload power that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A single large-scale AI training facility can consume 100 megawatts continuously. To put that in perspective, that's enough electricity to power roughly 200,000 homes. Nuclear energy is the only carbon-free technology that can deliver this kind of power at the scale these companies need. The economic opportunity is immense, potentially worth $2 trillion over the coming years as artificial intelligence transforms industry after industry. But here's the brutal truth. Without uranium, Trump's entire strategic vision collapses before it can even begin. So why would Canada's Prime Minister reject a request from its closest ally and largest trading partner? The answer lies in the months of tension that preceded this moment. This phone call didn't happen in a vacuum. It came after Trump threatened 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, after he publicly dismissed Canadian energy exports as unnecessary, after he made comments, some in jest, some apparently serious, about Canada potentially becoming the 51st U.S. state, after consistently treating America's second-largest trading partner with what many in Ottawa perceived as open contempt. According to a senior Canadian official who spoke with the Globe and Mail, the prevailing sentiment in the Canadian government is that Trump only reaches out when he wants something, never to build genuine partnership or show respect. Mark Carney saw an opportunity, and he took it. By refusing Trump's request, Carney accomplished something remarkable on multiple levels simultaneously. First, he reasserted Canadian sovereignty at a moment when it mattered most. After enduring months of bullying tactics, tariff threats, and dismissive rhetoric, Carney demonstrated that Canada won't simply comply when pressure is applied. The domestic political impact was immediate and powerful. Polling from Angus Reid showed Carney's approval ratings jumped 11 points within 72 hours. Canadians were rallying behind a leader who stood firm against American pressure. Second, Carney created tremendous leverage for upcoming trade negotiations. The United States-Mexico-Canada agreement will need to be renegotiated, and suddenly all those tariff threats and trade demands look very different when America needs something Canada controls. Carney can now approach those negotiations from a position of strength, essentially saying, "You want our uranium? Then remove the steel tariffs, drop the dairy demands, start treating us like the allies we're supposed to be." Third, and this is perhaps the most sophisticated element of Carney's strategy, he's repositioning Canada as an independent middle power that doesn't automatically defer to Washington's preferences. Almost immediately after refusing Trump, Canada opened formal discussions with France, the United Kingdom, Japan, and South Korea about long-term uranium supply agreements. Bloomberg reported these potential deals could be worth $18 billion over the next decade, completely bypassing American buyers. These countries are desperate for stable uranium supplies that don't come from Russia. They're willing to pay premium prices for Canadian reliability and quality. According to Christopher Sands from Johns Hopkins, whom journalists have consulted on energy security issues, Canada's nuclear sector provides leverage that very few nations possess. He noted that uranium and nuclear technology are strategic assets in the same category as oil was throughout the 20th century. Carney understands this represents generational positioning for Canada. The timing couldn't be better from his perspective. The global uranium market is incredibly tight right now. Spot prices have surged from $48 per pound to $89 per pound, an 85% increase driven by reactor restarts, new construction worldwide, and supply constraints. Cameco Corporation, the world's largest publicly traded uranium company, reported in recent earnings that its production is sold out years in advance. There simply isn't spare capacity available that Trump can easily tap into. Trump's team apparently operated under the assumption that Canada would cooperate because that's what allies do. They fundamentally misunderstood how much damage had been done to the relationship. The consequences of this standoff are radiating outward in ways that affect far more than just energy policy. Silicon Valley is in damage control mode. Microsoft has committed $80 billion to AI infrastructure development. Google is spending $75 billion. Amazon Web Services has pledged another $100 billion. Every single one of these plans assumes access to massive, reliable electricity supplies. Nuclear power is the only carbon-free option that can deliver at the scale they require. Sources at major technology companies who spoke with the information expressed serious concern. Executives are now questioning whether their growth projections are even achievable. Without guaranteed uranium supplies, nuclear projects face delays. Without nuclear power, AI expansion stalls. And without AI leadership, American technological dominance, particularly relative to China, begins to erode. One senior executive at a Fortune 50 technology company told the Wall Street Journal, "We're looking at potentially billions in delayed investments if we can't secure power commitments. This uranium situation is a five-alarm fire for our industry. Beyond tech, American consumers could feel the impact. If nuclear expansion stalls, the United States will lean more heavily on natural gas for baseload electricity. That drives up natural gas prices, which translates to higher heating bills for families and increased operating costs for energy-intensive businesses." Natural gas futures jumped 4.7% this week as traders began pricing in exactly this scenario. The U.S. Navy operates 86 nuclear-powered vessels, aircraft carriers and submarines that project American military power globally. While military uranium supplies are technically separate from civilian markets, the same processing facilities and supply chains support both sectors. Defense contractors like Bechtel, Fluor, and BWX Technologies have billions in contracts to build and maintain nuclear infrastructure. Their stock prices dropped between 3% and 8% this week as investors realize Canadian uranium access isn't guaranteed. But perhaps the most concerning dimension is what this means for NATO. The Atlantic Alliance's entire strategic posture has always assumed seamless U.S.-Canada alignment on defense and security matters. The two countries cooperate on NORAD, Arctic defense, submarine detection systems, and countless classified programs. European NATO allies are watching this dispute with genuine alarm. A senior European diplomat told Politico Europe "If America and Canada can't agree on uranium sales, how can we trust coordination on Article 5 commitments? This is unprecedented dysfunction between the closest allies in the alliance. France characteristically is capitalizing on the situation." President Macron's office announced that France and Canada will sign a strategic partnership on civil nuclear cooperation when Carney visits Paris next month. France secures reliable uranium for its 56 reactors. Canada gains a premium buyer and deeper European ties. America gets sidelined. Michael Schellenberger, a prominent nuclear energy advocate, warned, "If the U.S. can't secure uranium partnerships with Canada, our closest ally, it reveals catastrophic failures in American diplomacy. China will be thrilled to step in as Canada's alternative buyer." So where does this go from here? Expert analysis suggests we're at a genuine inflection point in North American relations. Dr. Pippa Malmgren, a former White House advisor and geopolitical economist, stated Carney's no is the most significant geopolitical move by a Canadian prime minister in a generation. Canada is asserting itself as an independent power, not a U.S. satellite. This changes everything about North American dynamics. Jonathan Wilkinson, Canada's former Natural Resources Minister, offered this perspective to the CBC. The Carney government is simply applying the same transactional approach to relations with Washington that Trump has applied to everyone else. If Trump treats alliances as business deals, Canada will negotiate like a business, maximizing value for Canadian interests. The American response has been mixed. Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming, chair of the Senate Energy Committee, called Canada's position disappointing and short-sighted, arguing that energy security should transcend political disputes between allies. But Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, typically a Republican moderate, struck a different tone. Perhaps we need to ask why our closest ally felt compelled to say no. What have we done to damage that relationship? Those are uncomfortable questions, but we need to answer them. The regulatory implications are substantial. The U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission has pending applications for 47 new reactor projects. Without confirmed fuel supplies, licensing becomes problematic. Utilities need 20-year fuel commitments before they'll invest billions in new plants. If Canadian supplies remain uncertain, projects could be delayed or canceled entirely. Thomas Isaacs, a former Department of Energy official and nuclear policy expert, told Arms Control Today, the U.S. allowed its domestic uranium production to collapse over decades, assuming allied suppliers would always be available. That assumption is now being tested. We may need to restart domestic mining, which could take years and cost billions. Several scenarios could unfold over the coming months. If Trump moderates his approach, removes tariffs, makes genuine concessions on trade issues, Canada might soften its position on uranium access. If Trump continues aggressive tactics, Canada will likely deepen partnerships with Europe and Asia, potentially locking U.S. buyers out of premium supplies for years. The wild card is China. If Canada begins selling significant quantities to non-Western buyers, U.S. security concerns could force some form of intervention, but that would only further damage the relationship and prove Canada's point about American overreach. One nuclear industry executive told Bloomberg, Trump asked for partnership but has only offered ultimatums. Canada finally called his bluff. Now we'll see if he can actually negotiate, or if this escalates into something far worse. Let's crystallize what we're really witnessing here. First, Trump desperately needs Canadian uranium to power America's nuclear renaissance and secure its position in the artificial intelligence revolution. But months of hostile treatment, tariff threats, and dismissive rhetoric destroyed the goodwill necessary to secure that partnership. Second, Mark Carney's one-word rejection demonstrates that Canada is willing to use its resource leverage as a geopolitical tool, fundamentally altering the power dynamic that has defined North American relations for generations. Third, NATO allies are observing what may be a historic fracture between the alliance's most integrated partners, raising profound questions about Western cohesion at a moment when global challenges demand unity. The bottom line is this: Trump treated Canada like a subordinate that would automatically comply with American requests. Carney just proved that Canada is an independent power with critical resources that America needs. Whoever blinks first in this standoff will define North American relations for the next generation. This leaves us with a question worth considering. Was Carney right to say no and demand better treatment? Or is he risking too much by taking such a hard line against the United States? The answer may determine not just the future of nuclear energy in North America, but the very nature of what it means to be allies in an increasingly multipolar world. One word from Canada has changed the calculation for everyone involved. Trump's next move could either rebuild a fractured alliance or push it toward a breaking point that seemed unimaginable just months ago. The stakes have never been higher, and the clock is ticking.